As I said earlier, my name is Aline Betzenhauser, and I'm the Field Station Coordinator at the Illinois State Archaeological Survey's American Bottom Field Station. The survey, also referred to as ISAS, is a division of the Prairie Research Institute at the University of Illinois. With about 70 full-time archaeologists and support staff working throughout the state, we are one of the largest archaeological research institutions in the U.S. Part of our mission is the dissemination of archaeological knowledge about the past to our peers and especially to the public. In that spirit, we're offering a series of webinars this winter and next spring to highlight our research. Today, we're pleased to welcome our second speaker, Dr. Elizabeth Watts Malouchos. Liz recently returned to ISAS's American Bottom Field Station as a research archaeologist after completing her PhD in anthropology at Indiana University earlier this year. She first fell in love with Illinois archaeology as a UIUC undergrad and while working for ISAS at the Janie B. Good site near East St. Louis. Before joining us, Liz was a research scientist in the Glenn Black Lab of Archaeology at IU, where she directed the new campus archaeology contract program and researched the archaeology of Indiana and the broader Midwest. Her research explores the relationships between social identities and the construction of the built environment during the Mississippian period, particularly at the Angel Mounds polity of southwestern Indiana. Liz employs archaeological geophysics and targeted excavations to understand how communities outside the Angel Mound Center built their houses and organized communal space, and how these architectural practices connected with communities across the wider region. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Elizabeth Watts Malouchos.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining, and thank you for spending your Friday evening with me, hearing about my research. I will note that it is past 5 o'clock in the Eastern time zone, so I think happy hour is fair game for y'all. So before I start talking about architectural alignments across the southwestern Indiana landscape, I want to take a moment to acknowledge and honor the Native nations whose ancestral homelands and resources the University of Illinois was built on. So I want to honor the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Ottawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. And I want to recognize that these lands were the traditional territory of these Native nations prior to their forced removal from Illinois and the Midwest, and that these lands continue to carry the stories of these Native nations and their struggles for survival and identity. I also want to recognize that I am sitting in my office in the American Bottom Field Station in Collinsville, Illinois right now. And that's just a few miles from Cahokia. And these are also the ancestral homelands of many groups, including the Delaware, Kaw, Kickapoo, Kansas, Miami, Osage, Peoria, Ponca, and Quapaw nations. I also want to recognize that my dissertation research in the landscape of southwestern Indiana took place on the ancestral homelands, again, of many of the same tribes. And I want to also note that Angel Mounds is a sacred site for the Quapaw tribe of Oklahoma. If you have never thought about what native land you are sitting on, particularly if you are tuning in from North America or South America, you are definitely residing on native land right now. I have posted here a wonderful website called Native Land that you can explore the indigenous occupation of both North and South America and anywhere in the world, because anywhere you are tuning in from, there's probably a good chance you are residing on the ancestral homelands of an indigenous community. I also wanted to link the University of Illinois Native American House. The land acknowledgement that I read about University of Illinois was based on a version that they wrote, and they're a wonderful educational and cultural resource that serves the indigenous faculty, staff, and students of the University of Illinois and helps to educate the wider university and public communities. So today I'm going to talk to you a bit about my recent dissertation research in southwestern Indiana. First, I'm going to briefly introduce the Mississippian culture. I'm sure we have folks tuning in that Mississippian culture and the archaeology of the Mississippian period is brand new, but we also have some of the foremost experts in the field tuning in as well. So I'm trying to strike a hard balance there. I'm going to introduce you to Angel Mounds in the wider polity, meaning the sites and communities outlying Angel, surrounding the Angel Mounds Center. I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about LIDAR, which stands for Light Detection and Ranging, which is a remote sensing technique that has really helped archaeologists really precisely pinpoint the alignments of Mississippian monumental architecture. And then I'm going to sort of briefly explain the movements of the moon and why that's important for thinking about Angel Mounds in the wider Angel landscape. Then I'm going to jump over to talking about hinterland communities and their organization and some wider trends in like architectural practices. I'm going to focus that discussion on the Stephen Stein Camp and my remote sensing survey of magnetometry that I used to detect architecture and community organization at that site for my dissertation. And then I'm going to sort of finish the talk talking about another interesting connection in southwestern Indiana between some anachronistic lithic tools from the Middle Woodland period that you find in Mississippian context. So it's all going to come together at the end. So a brief introduction into the Mississippian world. Too brief. Mississippian culture really first flourished at Cahokia Mounds. Can you all see my cursor? Get a head nod? No, no head nod. Let's see. Oh, I can use the laser pointer. Can you see my laser pointer now? Okay, great. So Mississippian culture first flourished on a large scale at Cahokia Mounds, the city of Cahokia, just a couple miles away from where I'm sitting, around 1050. And then Mississippian culture rapidly spread across the wider mid-continent and southeast following that. And in some places was still being practiced at contact. So when DeSoto arrived in the New World, he met Mississippians. And I'm going to be talking to you about Angel Mounds, again, on the Ohio River in southwestern Indiana, just east of modern-day Evansville, Indiana. Again, a brief introduction to Mississippian culture. Mississippian culture is not a monolith. It is extremely variable over space, and it's 600 plus year time span. But this is just sort of a general list of practices that I don't think too many archaeologists would argue with me about that can be associated with the Mississippian period. So Mississippian culture can be defined by complex organization, social, political, economic, religious organization, the construction of earthen mounds, this beautiful reconstruction done by Bill Isinger in the background. This is Monk's Mound, the largest Mississippian mound. And many of the Mississippian mounds, if not most Mississippian mounds, are this flat-topped pyramid style. Okay. The Mississippian period can also be defined by cosmological iconography that depicts upper, middle, and lower worlds and the animals, powers, and beings that inhabit those worlds. Mississippians were also maize agriculturalists. They grew a lot of corn and they ate a lot of corn. So not a large departure from the Midwest now in that sense. They crafted beautiful works of art and objects, which I'll show you a photo of in the next slide. They built their structures or their houses with a particular architectural style that we call wall trench architecture. You can see in the background or of the reconstruction image of Cahokia there, that people are building houses. They would have built a whole wall, dug a trench, and placed the whole wall in the trench. They made beautiful decorated pottery, and they made that pottery by adding shell, crushed and burned mussel shell to clay to make those pots. That's another hallmark of the Mississippian period. And they also practiced elaborate ceremonialism, which you'll get a sort of a taste for when I start talking about celestial alignments shortly. So here's just a small sampling of some of the amazing pieces of art that Mississippians crafted. Stone figurines, carved shell gorgets, hammered copper plates, beautiful pieces of lithic tools, of gaming pieces, and beautiful pieces of pottery that were ornately decorated or depicted animals and humans. So in the Mississippian world, we're going to zoom into southwestern Indiana. I'm going to get my laser pointer back. So here's Angel Mounds. Evansville today is right here. And I'm going to be talking about Angel Mounds, but then also focusing on 3 of the larger outlying hinterland sites that have seen extensive excavations. The Stephen Steinkamp site here, which is the focus of my dissertation, the Southwind site, and the Ellerbush site. But I want to mention that the Ray, Keister, and Dead Man's Curve sites have also seen smaller scale excavations. So a little background on Angel Mounds. Angel Mounds is located directly on the Ohio River. It consisted of 11 mounds with several iterations of a semicircular palisade fortification wall. Oops, sorry, y'all. Just going from a laser pointer again. These light blue lines are the palisade wall, and you can see the mounds in dark blue there. Generally, we divide the 400-year Angel chronology into 3 periods. We know Angel was founded just before AD 1050 with the construction of Mound A, and that one of the last events at Angel was a capping of Mound A at 1450. So the time between, basically based on differences in ceramics, we split into the Angel 1 phase, the earliest phase from before AD 1100 to AD 1200, about AD 1200. Angel 2 from about AD 1200 to about AD 1300, and then Angel 3 from about AD 1300 to AD 1450. So the sequence of events at Angel, as far as we can tell, is Mound A and Mound F were the first mounds constructed. And this happened just prior to AD 1050. At that time, it doesn't seem like the site was habitated. We don't have evidence for structures or any sort of regular habitation at that time, but there's also lots of the site left to be investigated. So around or after AD 1200, the first iteration of the palisade wall and the largest iteration of the palisade wall was constructed. After AD 1200, the rest of the mounds were built. And after AD 1200, that's when the site started to see a dense habitation. And this circle right here represents the East Village, or what archaeologists call the East Village, which was a large portion of the site excavated by Glenn Black from 1939 to the 1960s that revealed a number of structures, around 89, in a very small area. Oh, and then I want to mention that the palisade contracted through time. And that again, the last events that we know of at Angel were capping events where they placed another layer of earth over mounds A and F before the site was, I want to say depopulated, but not used the same that it was. So people probably started leaving around that time. Here's a really nice reconstruction done by artist Herb Rowe of Angel. You can see Mound A there in the middle, sort of defining the center and central axis of the site, and the largest and first iteration of the palisade to get an idea of what the site may have looked like. So during those broad scale excavations that I was speaking of by Glenn, under the auspices of Glenn Black, 2.5 million artifacts were collected from Angel. That's sort of an astounding number of artifacts. But Angel became famous for its negative painted plates. So these were really beautifully painted or designed plates painted with a resist painting technique in red, black, and white colors in gorgeous designs. And I like to describe the plates as analogous to the salad bowls at Olive Garden, or if you will, a shallow, wide-rimmed soup bowl. That style of soup bowl has kind of become popular in the last like 20 years. So anyway, salad plated Olive Garden is what I compare these to. But really amazing designs painted on the rims of these vessels. The process or the practice of negative painting isn't singular to Angel Mounds. You find it elsewhere in the Ohio Valley, particularly Kincaid Mounds, and in the Nashville Basin area of Tennessee. However, negative painted plates on that particular style of plate is more unique to Angel. So typically, archaeologists have used decorated pottery to sort of trace interactions and relationships between different sites, different communities, different regions of people. So thinking about negative painted pottery, which is quite frequently found in, especially in the East Village at Angel, and Angel has sort of become synonymous with this negative painted plate style of pottery. Thinking about how the wider polity shown here, sort of from the mouth of the Wabash almost past the mouth of the Green River, the material connections, it gets a little murkier. Negative painted plates are hardly found outside of Angel at the outlying sites. Here is a graph of negative painted plate sherds according to the number of meters excavated at the site, number of square meters. So you can see the density of negative painted plates is much, much higher in the East Village of Angel than it is even in Angel Mound context. But it's almost negligible at outlying sites and in their hinterlands. There was only one negative painted sherd found at the Stephenstein campsite and only a handful found at Southwind. No negative painted plates were found at Ellerbush. So using this decorated style that Angel is famous for to sort of trace relationships across the region doesn't quite work well. So that sort of led me to some of the major research questions for my research or my dissertation research, in that, you know, how are polities integrated? How are these outlying communities that are actually pretty far from Angel, 60, 65 and 75 kilometers downriver, how are they integrated with the Civic Ceremonial Center at Angel? And how can these larger group identities and community identities be constructed and negotiated through the built environment, particularly the regular architecture of just domestic residences? Now, before I continue in talking about the hinterlands and some of my research, I want to step back and talk about the really cool things that folks have figured out with the organization of the Angel Monumental Landscape. And I'm going to take a drink of water. So Mound A, the oldest, largest, most central mound at Angel. Folks and researchers, of course, have noticed for a long time that the long axis sort of defines the structure of some of the other mounds and some organization of the site. And that long axis, different researchers have said it's oriented between 22 and 24 degrees. Now, not only Mound A, but Mound F shares this orientation, and structures on top of Mound F, Mound D, Mound J, and Mound B, and a portion of the Western Palisade actually all share the same orientation. This is where LiDAR comes in really handy nowadays. It's a relatively new technology being used widely in archaeology. And the process of LiDAR is traditionally a plane flies over the area that you were looking at and emits laser pulses that are so fast that they can penetrate the tree canopy. They can get between the leaves and they can penetrate sort of some of the ground coverage to get to the surface of the ground and produce really precise, lovely, essentially topographic maps, but they're really precise. So to give you a sense, this is a Google Earth satellite image of Angel Mounds from 2019. You can see there's quite a bit of tree cover. Now, this is a LiDAR image done by the state of Indiana. This is older. This is not as high of a resolution as people are doing LiDAR now, but you can still see there's a great difference in terms of what you can detect from the site. And in particular, Mound A here, you can see that the weeds and grasses on the side are sort of obstructing a full and precise view of the mound, whereas you can see the clean cut and straight sides in the LiDAR. And I do want to give a shout out to my colleagues at the Indiana University Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. They have done some drone-based LiDAR recently with 1 to 2 centimeter resolution, and it is beautiful and mind-blowing, and they will be publishing that soon, so keep an eye out for it because it's gorgeous, well done, Ayuma. So again, LiDAR comes in really handy because archaeologists, and particularly archaeoastronomers, of which I am admittedly not one, I want to make that clear, they can use LiDAR to precisely figure out the orientations of the monument, of Mississippian monuments, mounds, and then also alignments between monuments, things like that. So here is sort of a map of the movements of both the sun and the moon on the landscape, how you would map those out. I think most of us are more familiar with thinking of the longest and shortest day of the year with the summer solstice and the winter solstice, but less familiar with the long patterns and long lunar cycles of the moon. So I'm going to take a step back and talk about lunar cycles for a second before we continue. So this GIF that I created is depicting the regular cycle that I think most of us are familiar with, the regular lunar cycle of every 4 weeks. The rising and setting of the moon sort of swings back and forth over the landscape, rising in the northeast, swinging to the southeast, setting in the northwest, swinging to the southwest. However, there's a much longer cycle where the width of that angle expands really slowly over time, from a minimum to a maximum and back to the minimum. So this expanding from the minimum here to the maximum takes 9.3 years, and then 9.3 years back from the maximum to the minimum. So that means that there are 8 spots on the horizon, or 8 events where it seems like the moon stops moving and stands still and then reverses in its path. So that is why you will hear me say lunar standstills throughout the rest of this presentation, because it looks like the moon stands still and then goes in reverse. So again, there are 8 of these, and they only occur once every 18.6 years, each standstill. There are 2 maximum and 2 minimum for the moon rise, and 2 maximum and 2 minimum for the moon set. So back to how LiDAR comes in really handy for archaeologists, or archaeoastronomers in this case. Bill Romaine is an archaeoastronomer, and within the last several years, he's recalculated the orientation of Mound A and the overall angel axis. And so he put the angel axis at 23 degrees east of north, with orthogonals at 293, degrees and 113 degrees east of north, with an error of plus or minus 1 degree. And he noted that the angel axis then is within a 10th degree of the northern minimum moon set lunar standstill, which is really cool. So the short axis of Mound A very precisely aligns with the northern minimum moon set. Tim Pocketat also noted that the southern minimum moon rise is close to the short axis, the other azimuth. I believe the moon rise comes up at 114.8 degrees. So it's within about 2 degrees of the short axis of Mound A. So this is just my attempt at illustrating if you were standing north of Mound A, looking south, where these lunar standstills would happen on the landscape, all 8 of them. And again, the one that we are most concerned with, that Mound A is very precisely aligned with, is the northern minimum moonset. But also I want you to keep in mind that, close by, the southern minimum moonrise also happens. So Mound A and the angel axis, the organizational axis, really precisely aligns with one lunar standstill and potentially references two. Oh, and I also wanted to note, when I say angel axis throughout the rest of the presentation, I don't just mean the long primary axis of Mound A. I mean the orthogonals that align to the lunar standstills as well. I sort of call the whole thing the angel axis as I'm talking. And when I define the angel axis at other sites, I give myself plus or minus 2 degrees of error. So you might be thinking, okay, this is sort of a random lunar alignment. It seems a little far-fetched, but there are lots of other Mississippian sites, including the city of Cahokia, that also have lunar alignments. So respective research recently by Sarah Byrace, Tim Pocketat, and then Bill Romaine has shown that the Rattlesnake Causeway, well, one has verified the Rattlesnake Causeway, a built-up causeway that sort of defined the organizational axis of the whole city of Cahokia, running from Rattlesnake Mound all the way up to Monk's Mound. And you can see it in the LiDAR base map. And so this axis is 5 degrees east of north. But if you draw a series of rectangles, this is what Bill Romaine figured out. If you draw a series of rectangles and you look at the diagonals, they have some really cool alignments. And one of them is the southern maximum moonrise at about 130 degrees here. So Cahokia, the largest Mississippian center, the first and only large Mississippian city of its scale and size, was aligned to the moon. And if you move outside of Cahokia, the Emerald Acropolis Mound Center, an outlying mound center in the uplands, also seems to align from the moon. This is an illustration by a recent publication by Tim Pocketat, Susan Alt, and Jeff Cruckton. And it's a really nice image that illustrates that the 53-degree azimuth that structures the site, or structures the mounds, the alignment of the mounds there, aligns to the northern maximum moonrise. Moving outside of the Cahokia region, Tim Pocketat observed that Kincaid Mounds, which is down the Ohio River from Angel, and was once considered sort of the sister site of Angel because there are some similarities. And now one of those similarities can be a lunar alignment. It seems like Kincaid's 70 or 67-degree azimuth aligns with the northern minimum moonrise. And as more archaeologists across the Mississippian world start looking for lunar alignments, it seems like more people are finding them. But this is not unique to the Mississippian world. And in fact, we see these lunar alignments 1,000 years before, during the Middle Woodland period, from around 100 BC to 500 AD. The image you see here is a 3D reconstruction of Newark earthworks in Newark, Ohio. And the central earthwork is it's a circle and an octagon together. The primary axis of this paired earthwork aligns to a lunar standstill, but also several of the walls and the gateways left open align to lunar standstills, so that this earthwork aligns to all 8 lunar standstills. And it is not the only one of its kind. There is another circle and octagon with lunar alignments also in Ohio at the High Bank site. Okay, I'm going to take a quick step back from the moon, and I'm going to introduce some hinterland sites and talk to you about residential architectural patterns. So my research focused on the Stevenstein campsite, about 65 kilometers downriver from Angel, about 30 kilometers overland as the crow flies. Stephen Steinkamp was originally thought to be an early site, an Angel 1 site, but my excavations actually revealed that it is Angel 3. It's a late site. It's the only late site outside of Angel Mounds itself, and most of the features excavated date to about 80 1350, so pretty late in the Angel sequence. From 2011 to 2015, I conducted a magnetic gradiometry survey, which I will show you the results of in just a second. But I'm going to explain magnetic gradiometry first. It's a geophysical method to remotely, and it's a great method, it's super effective for remotely sensing large-scale community organization and household architecture. And it's also, of course, non-invasive and non-destructive, which makes it a really ideal methodology. So you can do magnetometry by using a gradiometer, or sometimes called magnetometers. It's this machine that I'm wearing that looks like a football goalpost. The goalposts are actually sensors that passively measure the small variations in the Earth's magnetic field, pretty close to the surface. So those variations are caused through a number of reasons. Mostly that, one, you have iron-rich artifacts. So if you have historic debris like steel nails, things like that, agricultural equipment, those get detected very well. That is why magnetometry makes a very good method for pre-contact sites, because you don't have the type of iron-rich metals at pre-contact sites that you would for historic sites that are full of iron nails and will sort of obscure everything. You also get variation through heating and burning. So in the photo below, if you look at the center, these really strong black signature, or this really strong black signature represents a Mississippian hearth inside of a house. And because the earth was thermally altered, it changed the magnetism of the soil and can be detected by magnetometry. And also the concentrations of sort of junk and trash and the organic matter in that junk and trash that often fill in abandoned Mississippian houses or pre-contact houses and pre-contact pits. Those have a different magnetic signature than the undisturbed soil around them. So anytime that pre-contact Native Americans or Mississippians were digging into the ground and disturbing the soil, oftentimes the magnetically enriched organic fill that would fill those in can be detected through magnetometry. So again, to reference this, these are the walls of a wall trench structure in magnetometry at Stephen Steinkamp. And here are the walls mapped of a Mississippian structure that was excavated at Angel to give you a sense of what magnetometry can really detect. So here are the results of my survey. You can see Stephen Steinkamp is right on the Ohio. I'm going to zoom in to talk more. Right away, what's striking is the organization of the site. You seem to have a really dense central cluster here, sort of demarcated by a linear anomaly at the north side of the site. All of these little squares are structures and represent houses. And this area here that seems to be kind of devoid of at least houses and some features was probably an open courtyard or plaza area. This right here is a steel gas pipeline that we did not know was under the road until it was too late and we had already surveyed it. So you win some, you lose some in magnetometry. But I was really interested in the potential or the possibility that this linear anomaly might be a palisade wall at the northern side of the site, and then at the number of structures. So I identified 83 structures in magnetometry, but I know given my excavations, there are more than that. So 83 is sort of the minimum that I identified. And you can see them marked in blue here. And not only are there so many of them and they're so densely clustered together, but a lot of them seem to share the same orientation. And this open area that's probably a courtyard or a plaza also seems to share that orientation. And when I started measuring the orientation of individual structures, it turns out that 33% of them align pretty precisely with the angel axis, within plus or minus 2 degrees of the angel axis. And all of those are highlighted in orange here. And I would say also the part of the courtyard or plaza that I detected also shares that alignment. And while many structures don't precisely align within plus or minus 2 degrees, I think several share, several generally align, about 61% go with the general sort of angel axis grain at Stevenstein Camp. Okay, I'm gonna head to the Southwind site, about 75 kilometers downriver from Angel and just about 10 kilometers downriver from Stevenstein Camp. This is the Southwind architectural site plan that shows 96 total building episodes of a village surrounded or built around rather sort of circular or ovate oval shaped plaza or courtyard. And then the site is surrounded by a rectangular bastion palisade fortification wall. Southwind is earlier than Stevenstein Camp in the sequence, dating to the Angel 1 and early Angel 2 phases. And when I started looking at alignments that had been reported by Cheryl Munson, who led excavations in the late 80s at the site, it turned out that about 17% of the structures aligned with the angel axis, and about a third of the site sort of generally goes with the angel axis grain. Again, highlighted in orange for Southwind. And the oldest and largest structure here, sort of on a prominent place on the plaza courtyard, is aligned to the angel axis. Right away, you can see similarities with Stevenstein Camp and the overall organization, the prominence of aligned structures on the northwestern side of the plaza or courtyard, and also similar orientations of the anomaly that I think is a palisade, but I was not able to confirm that through excavation with the Southwind palisade. They are both oriented at 96 degrees east of north. Now I'm going to move to the Ellerbush site. This is a small hamlet with only a few structures, and it's really close to Angel, only about 3 kilometers northwest or northeast, excuse me, of Angel Mounds. The Ellerbush is early in the Angel sequence, dating to about 1156, so it is Angel 1. And there are 5 total building structures that were detected, or excavated rather, at Ellerbush. And this structure that was rebuilt, built at least 2 full times, orients to the angel axis, precisely within plus or minus 2 degrees. And this structure here also sort of generally or less precisely aligns. So the majority of the structures at Ellerbush sort of reference the angel axis. At Angel Mounds itself, of 89 structures excavated by Glenn Black during the Glenn Black era, only 1 of 89, which is just over 1%, aligned to the angel axis. This one structure in S11D, excuse me, which is located here, just east of Mound A. However, a site-wide magnetometry survey was completed by Stefan Peterson as part of his 2010 dissertation, and he detected 237 individual structures through magnetometry, and you can see all of them on the angel map here. I was able to go in and measure the orientations based on his definition of those structures and his detection of those structures, and only 15 out of 237 oriented precisely with the angel axis. However, he identified 2 neighborhoods, one here and one here close to Mound A, and those more generally followed the angel axis grain. So at Angel Mounds, of all excavated structures And magnetically detected structures, there are 326 total. Only 16 align with the angel axis, which is actually under 5%, not a large percentage. So if you compare that across the region, much higher proportions of residential structures were aligned to the angel axis in the hinterland sites than they were at Angel Mounds proper. So it seems like the angel axis was built into the landscape more prominently via the monumental landscape at Angel, but it was important in the hinterland sites and outlying sites to build domestic structures and make sort of the domestic landscape aligned to the angel axis. And so I've argued that sort of the everyday movements through, around, and between not only aligned structures, but also mounds would have physically reinforced connections to angel, both at the angel center and then at the outlying sites. And so that's one of the main ways that community was sort of materially constructed through the built landscape across the region, was the importance of aligning your communities and your communal spaces and some of your households to this particular alignment. And I'll say, I don't have a graph to represent this, but of 525 structures or building episodes of structures, either excavated or detected via magnetometry in the whole region, 64 are aligned with the angel axis, which is only about 12%, which isn't much. But if you compare hinterland structures or hinterland communities as a whole to angel mounds, about 25% of hinterland structures, residential structures, were aligned to the angel axis, whereas less than 5% were aligned at angel. So if we really want to trace the history of the angel axis, we actually have to step back in the landscape and then step back in time and go to the man site here, sort of sandwiched between Southwind and Stevens Steinkamp, downriver from Angel. Oops. And the man site is a really impressive complex of both geometric earthworks and mounds. There are 17 of them. It's a huge complex, and this is a Middle Woodland site, again, dating to 100 BC to about 500 AD. So this is in the Angel landscape. And some recent work by Mike Strzerzewski and Stefan Peterson, where they geo-referenced old maps of man on modern satellite imagery, allowed me to go back in and measure the orientation of some of the geometric earthworks. So you can see here highlighted in orange are two of the walls of geometric earthwork IU2, and those very precisely align to the angel axis or align with the angel axis. And IU3 here generally aligns. So it seems the angel axis actually predates angel mounds by about 1,000 years and was built and written on the landscape during the Middle Woodland period at the Man Mounds complex. Some other interesting ties between Mississippians and the ancestral Man Middle Woodland landscape are Mound G at Angel Mounds. So about 600 meters northeast of the outer palisade at Angel here that I have circled. There's a conical mound that archaeologists suspect is Middle Woodland, but it hasn't been verified yet. It's a conical mound, and it is separated from the rest of the site. So that's quite interesting. There's a photo of Mound G, and its square shape that you can see at the base is actually a product of modern agriculture, and it wasn't built that way. There's also another interesting connection and pattern tied to the Middle Woodland that you see across all of these angel phase sites. And that is the collection and reuse of Middle Woodland lithic tools. So here at the top, you can see lamellar blades and a low flared base point from the man site. And here below, you see these same types of artifacts that were found in feature contexts at Angel, Southwind, Stevens Steinkamp, and also Ellerbush. I just don't have a good photo of those artifacts. So it seems like Mississippian folks were going probably to the mound complex, but also to other man-faced sites in the region. And they were collecting lithic tools. They were taking them back to their respective communities. Some were curated in mounds at Angel. Others were used and discarded with regular refuse in the East Village of Angel. At Southwind and Stevens Steinkamp, you see these Middle Woodland tools were used, and the use wear on these, they're heavily reused and heavily fragmented, more so than the tools found at the man site. So they're definitely being utilized quite heavily when they're being collected by Mississippians. But at Southwind and Stevens Steinkamp, you find these tools placed in the architecture of houses when they're being built, on the floors of houses, and then also included in some regular refuse. So I argue that another important community building practice throughout the polity was collecting and reusing these Middle Woodland tools, not only to connect all of the Angel communities as a wider polity, but then also connect to the deeper ancestral landscape. Oh, here are the numbers for the different sites. There are quite a few of these Middle Woodland tools that were found at Southwind. And some have argued that this was just sort of a convenient reuse of tools that would have been, really close to the site. So to go get high quality chert, they don't have to go very far. They can just go to man. But the Wyandotte Caves, which is the source material and the raw material resource that most of the blades are made out of, is a really high quality chert. And it's about 80 kilometers overland and 180 kilometers up the river. So not too far from Angel. And I would assume that they knew where the Wyandotte Caves were because folks at Angel were trading and importing cherts from really far away and other lithic materials. Dover from Tennessee, Mill Creek from Southern Illinois, Burlington from the Crescent Quarries in Missouri. So getting chert from far away was not something foreign to the folks living at Angel. Additionally, you would expect that the density of these tools would be really high at the sites that are very close to the man complex. Southwind, which is the closest, it's just over a kilometer away. It actually has the lowest density when you compare the number of tools found per square meter, excavated. And the sites farther afield, like Ellerbush and Angel, actually have higher densities of artifacts, or of Middle Woodland tools, I should say. So to move from the tools back to the built landscape, I just want to summarize that at Hinterland sites, residential structures and communal spaces were built with the exact same orientation as the foundational monumental landscape at Angel. The Angel axis was built in alignment with the movements of the moon, and this lunar orientation reflected cosmological principles that guide the underlying city plan at Cahokia. But like the ancestral tools, the importance of lunar aligned landscapes long predates the Mississippian occupation of the region, and connections to the powerful Middle Woodland landscape may likely be what established or motivated the establishment of the Angel polity and brought the Angel world into being. Many, many people and institutions helped with my dissertation research. So I'm not going to list everybody, but thank you from the bottom of my heart for your help and support over the years. Okay, I think we're ready for questions.
Thank you so much, Liz. That was a great presentation. So we have a few minutes for questions, and I'll just get it started with this one. Are the structures aligned to the Angel axis bigger or built any different than non-aligned structures?
No, I couldn't find any patterns and differences in either shape or floor plans or the size of floors of structures between aligned and non-aligned structures.
Here's one from Jacob. He's wondering if we have any idea where negative plates were made, if they were centrally produced or not.
Probably because, well, there had to have been specialists at Angel Mounds because they're all, the process of resist painting and the designs painted on them are really standard and really well done. So it would have been coming out of Angel, I suspect, because we don't find any negative plates at negative painted plates, at outlying sites, but also the craftsmanship and artistry involved also indicates that they would have been produced by specialists, probably at Angel.
Other than lunar alignments, are there other connections between Angel and Cahokia?
Oh, okay. Yes. So the lunar alignment isn't the only thing. At Cahokia, there was a really beautiful, and I didn't prepare a photo of it, of course. There's a really beautiful style of pottery made called Ramey incised that has it's a very specific shape of pot, and it has very specific designs incised on it. And so you actually find Ramey incised pottery at Angel, a lot of it in a feasting pit, feature 37 at Angel, which may date to the founding of the site or sort of early habitation. We think it dates pretty early. And there's a number of Ramey incised potsherds there, and then some throughout the East Village. The interesting thing is that they seem like they were made with local clay. So either knowledgeable potters from Cahokia were coming to Angel and using sort of like local elements to make Cahokian style pots, or perhaps folks from Angel were going to Cahokia, learning the style, learning how to make these pots really well, good imitations, and then coming back to Angel and using local materials.
Okay, this one is from Steve. He's wondering why they align to lunar orientations rather than solar positions, since solar positions seem like they'd be helpful for agriculture.
Yes, thank you, Steve. That's a great question and reminded me of one of the things that I wanted to emphasize when I was talking about the lunar orientations that I failed to emphasize. And that is that the lunar alignments are likely not the only alignments at Angel. Angel seems like it might be full of alignments. And Bill Romaine, the archaeoastronomer who sort of defined that northern minimum moon set, he and Ed Herman, who is the director of the new IU Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, are currently working on tracing out other alignments to the sun, to constellations, to the Milky Way galaxy, I think, and they have a publication, I think, coming down the pike soon. So look out for that because there are solar alignments as well.
Let's see. A lot of questions just came in. Is there any evidence that Angel Face people actually excavated into man or other middle woodland features or sites to get the materials?
That's a great question. And I don't think there is any evidence of that, although excavations at the man site were sort of sporadic through they were either done by avocational archaeologists early on or sporadically by Indiana University through like the 1960s and 70s, and they weren't extremely wide scale. Stefan Peterson has done, and Mike Strzerzewski have done a huge magnetic survey that I think they're continuing to do of the man site that shows thousands and thousands and thousands of pits. And I don't think magnetically, you would not be able to tell the difference in between necessarily a middle woodland pit or a Mississippian excavation to collect resources, I think. So there is no evidence of that, but I wouldn't be surprised if it does turn up in the future.
Okay, well, we're just about out of time, so I think we'll wrap it up. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. And if you missed our first lecture, it's available on YouTube. Our next lecture will be on February 26th. So thank you and have a great night.
Thanks for coming, everyone.